Hey guys, tonight we're dusting off the velvet curtains and stumbling straight into a world so gaudy, so over the top, so deliciously ridiculous that it makes your local HOA president look modest. Welcome to the Gilded Age, the era when being filthy rich meant having more gold-plated bathroom fixtures than sense, and a whole staff just to keep your poodles fluffed. Forget quiet luxury. Tonight we're diving into the kind of excess that would make even your in-laws blush. Palaces on Fifth Avenue, dinners with diamond-studded potatoes, and rival families throwing money at problems that, in all honesty, could have been solved with a decent plumber. You know the drill. Before you lean back on your hopefully not gold-plated pillow, hit the like button and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of nonsense. Drop a comment telling me what time it is and whether your bathtub is made of solid silver. No judgment if it's not. Now dim those lights, fire up your sleep fan for that luxurious white noise, and get comfortable. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how Gilded Age millionaires really eat gold for breakfast? Did their kids have diamond-encrusted teddy bears? How many servants does it take to polish a moustache? Could you survive a day wearing a corset so tight you faint before dessert? Would you last an hour at a dinner party where the forks outnumber the guests? Or would you get kicked out for asking for ketchup? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1883 New York City. Your bed canopy costs more than most people's houses. Your breakfast is being prepared by a chef with a French accent thicker than your mattress, and you have no idea where your monocle went. Good luck. The sun leaks in through damask curtains as soft as a cloud, assuming your clouds are monogrammed and hand-stitched in Paris. You're not just waking up. You're being delicately revived by a personal maid wielding a silver bell. Before your feet even touch the Turkish carpet, a servant has already brought you hot chocolate, slippers, and, if you're lucky, a list of the day's scheduled scandals. You open your eyes and for a moment you're not entirely sure if you're still dreaming. The ceiling above you is an absurd canvas of painted cherubs, all smugly floating in a sky so blue you'd think someone imported the Mediterranean just for your bedroom. There's no alarm clock blaring, just the faint tinkle of silver against china as breakfast is prepared in the adjoining room, a sound more soothing than any meditation app modernity could devise. You briefly consider closing your eyes again, just to see if the staff will mistake you for at rest and tiptoe around your bed for another hour. Spoiler, they will. Rising in the Gilded Age isn't just about waking up, it's a production. The very air smells expensive. There's a hint of roses from yesterday's bouquets, beeswax polish, and, faintly, the whiff of last night's French perfume. Somewhere, a footman is already heating water for your morning bath, while the housekeeper inspects the hallway for rogue dust particles with the severity of a customs agent. Meanwhile, your personal maid, let's call her Mabel, because everyone's maid is named Mabel, stands ready with a dressing gown that costs more than your neighbour's entire wardrobe. Mabel clears her throat, a gentle, practiced cough that means, "It's time to get up, but only if you're ready, sir or madam." She draws back the curtains, flooding the room with morning light and the distant sound of horses and carriage wheels echoing from Fifth Avenue. You squint, not because it's too bright, but because you still can't quite believe you live here. A house this size doesn't even creak in the morning. It politely sighs. Let's talk about your bed. It's not just a bed. It's a feather-filled fortress, complete with a headboard that looks like it was looted from a French palace, and more throw pillows than should legally be allowed. You're buried under layers of Irish linen, silk coverlets, and a blanket you suspect is cashmere, though no one can say for sure asking is considered gauche. If you're lucky, the sheets were changed while you slept, which is a real thing when you employ enough people to form your own minor league baseball team. Eventually you sit up, instantly surrounded by action. Mabel slips your feet into warmed slippers, none of that cold floor nonsense for you, and a second maid, let's call her also Mabel, offers a tray of hot chocolate thick enough to be mistaken for pudding. Breakfast in bed is expected. A crystal vase of fresh-cut flowers sits beside a silver dish of candied orange peel. There's a newspaper folded just so, with the less upsetting headlines placed on top, and your monogram discreetly embroidered on the napkin, just in case you forget who you are before noon. Somewhere beyond your suite's double doors, the household orchestra is already tuning up for the day. The butler, Mr. Grimble, is rehearsing your schedule, the cook is bellowing about soufflés, and the stable master is fighting with the gardener over who gets first crack at the new shipment of imported hay. But in your bedroom, time is syrupy and slow. You contemplate the day's daunting first decision. Will you rise now and risk being early to breakfast, or stay in bed a bit longer and blame delicate nerves for your tardiness? As you finally stand, you catch sight of yourself in one of 3 oversized mirrors. Even your reflection looks pampered, if a bit confused by the sheer number of dressing gowns available. Mabel gently hands you the scandal sheet, the highlight of any Gilded Age morning. Will Mrs. Astor's niece run off with a French baron? Did the neighbour's peacock get loose again? Is there an emerging feud over whose marble fountain is more artistically unnecessary? And so begins another day as the filthy rich. You haven't even brushed your teeth, and already you're exhausted from the luxury. Honestly, it's a miracle anyone here ever got anything done. But don't worry, there's a staff meeting about that at 11, and if you're feeling faint, Mabel has just the smelling salts for you. Welcome to morning in the palace. You've survived the hardest part, waking up. The rest of the day, only slightly more ridiculous. Clothes don't just make the man, they suffocate him. In the Gilded Age, getting dressed is a team sport. There's a valet, a butler, a seamstress, and possibly an entire small committee dedicated to ensuring your collar is starched enough to bruise your jawline. Corsets, bustles, cufflinks the size of sparrows. By the time you're dressed, you need a nap. It begins with a knock at the door, so polite it almost apologizes for existing. The valet glides in, already holding today's sartorial battle plan. If you're a gentleman, you have a choice of morning coats, frock coats, or, if you're feeling especially rebellious, a lounge suit, which is basically formal pajamas with better marketing. Your shirt arrives so crisp and heavily starched that folding it could cause a minor avalanche. And then there's the collar, which looks harmless enough, until it's snapped on with a force that could sever a weaker person's carotid artery. For ladies, it's a journey through more layers than a Russian nesting doll. First, the chemise, a linen slip as plain as virtue itself, one of the few moments of comfort you'll experience all day. Next comes the corset, laced so tightly you'll understand the true meaning of breathless anticipation. If you ever wanted to know what it feels like to be both supported and under attack, this is your moment. An entire living room's worth of staff may be involved in the cinching process, all while you try to look serene and faintly mysterious, instead of, say, panicked and oxygen-deprived. Don't get too comfortable. Once the corset is in place, it's time for layers. Petticoats, a bustle cage, because who doesn't want the silhouette of an extremely fashionable camel, and a skirt so voluminous it could be rented out as an Airbnb? You're swaddled, cinched, puffed, and then finally draped in a gown of silk or velvet, embroidered by hand and costing more than the average worker's annual salary. Each ruffle is a status symbol, each bow a gentle reminder that you have absolutely nowhere to sit. Men don't have it much easier. Trousers are pressed so sharply they could be used for fencing. Waistcoats come in colours so bright they're practically a cry for help. You button, you cuff, you wrestle with a cravat that, according to your valet, simply must be tied with exactly 3 symmetrical folds or the world will end. Your shoes are polished to a mirror shine by someone who lives in fear of scuff marks. If you're lucky, your monocle fits on the first try, and you don't accidentally swallow it while sneezing. Meanwhile, accessories must be debated. For men, it's a pocket watch, possibly on a gold chain thicker than most family ties, cufflinks shaped like little horseshoes or golden acorns, a walking stick for show, and a top hat so tall you risk low-hanging chandeliers. For ladies, there are gloves, buttoned up to the elbow no less, pearl earrings, and a necklace strategically chosen to suggest both refinement and please. Don't ask me about my husband's railroad investments. Every article is inspected for perfection. The butler might pause to pluck a stray thread, the maid will smooth a wrinkle, and someone, no one's quite sure who, will appear out of nowhere to lint-roll your lapels with the solemnity of a royal blessing. There's a certain drama in all of this, a daily Broadway production with you as the slightly unwilling star. You try to remember not to fidget because one misplaced tug and the entire ensemble could collapse like a souffle in a thunderstorm. And then, when you're finally dressed and declared fit for public viewing, you stand there, back ramrod straight, lungs half collapsed, legs already numb, and wonder, how did anyone in this era get anything done? Walking, sitting, breathing, all become calculated risks. If you're feeling bold, you might attempt to eat breakfast without spilling coffee on your cravat. Good luck. By the end of this ordeal, you're exhausted. You've burned more calories putting on clothes than you will walking to dinner. But take heart. You look magnificent if slightly haunted. And remember, you'll get to do it all again tomorrow, with new fabrics, new colours, and perhaps a new level of existential despair. In the Gilded Age, fashion isn't just what you wear, it's what wears you down. Breakfast arrives with more ceremony than a royal wedding. The table is set with 12 forks, 3 kinds of eggs, and enough silverware to arm a small militia. Forget about grabbing a granola bar here. It's oysters, champagne, and toast carved into your family crest. Coffee, only if it's been blessed by a European count. As you enter the dining room, the first thing that hits you isn't the smell of food, it's the sheer scale of it all. The chandelier above the table sparkles with enough crystals to blind a small army, and the morning light dances off the gilded edges of every plate. Your seat is pre-warmed, your napkin is folded into the shape of a mythical beast, and the floral arrangement in the centre of the table is so tall you can barely see your own relatives on the other side. This is less a meal and more a carefully choreographed performance, where every mouthful is both a privilege and a potential etiquette landmine. Servants move silently around the room, each gliding with the precision of synchronized swimmers in crisp uniforms. The butler stands nearby, scanning for any sign of distress, be it an empty glass or a frown at the Eggs Benedict. You nod politely, careful not to look too hungry. Gilded Age manners dictate that you must act as if you just stumbled upon this feast entirely by accident and could take or leave it. Meanwhile, inside, your stomach is composing sonnets to fried potatoes. The first course arrives. Fruit, artfully sliced and arranged with geometric obsession. A melon ball has never looked so smug. You spear a grape, resisting the urge to hurl it across the table in a spontaneous display of rebellion. Conversation at breakfast is encouraged, but only at a polite decibel level, and ideally on subjects as bland as possible. Last night's opera, the weather in Newport, or the recent scandal involving someone else's cousin's horse. Then the eggs, yes, plural, poached, scrambled, and a la goldenrod, which means someone spent half an hour making a sauce so elaborate it will be forgotten by lunchtime. Next, a parade of meats. Ham glazed in Madeira, bacon crisped to architectural perfection, and sausages that seem to dare you to find a single speck of grease. On the side, toast. But not just any toast. This is bread with a pedigree, sliced exactly 1 inch thick and branded with your monogram, because what's the point of being wealthy if your carbohydrates don't come with a personal logo? If you're feeling continental, there's a spread of cheeses and pastries, each one imported at enormous cost and calories. The croissant has travelled farther than most of the guests at the table. Someone mutters something about the dangers of new money serving English muffins. Scandalous! You smile vaguely and reach for the pastries with practiced restraint, lest anyone see you eager. And yes, the oysters. Raw, briny and resting on a bed of ice that's probably from a glacier in Maine. These are the ultimate breakfast flex. You try to look nonchalant as you slide one down, but internally you're questioning every life choice that led to raw shellfish at 8 a.m. This, you realise, is not a meal for the faint of stomach or the lactose intolerant. The beverages deserve their own chorus. There is freshly squeezed orange juice so rare and precious in New York that it's guarded like state secrets. Champagne flutes stand ready, because nothing says it's Thursday like bubbles before 9. And then, of course, the coffee. Brewed in a silver pot by a Frenchman with a moustache more elegant than your handwriting, the coffee arrives accompanied by a selection of sugars and creams, all presented like diplomatic gifts from a distant kingdom. Don't even think about asking for just a regular cup. You'll be handed a look so frosty it could chill the lobster. By the time you've delicately nibbled your way through half a dozen courses, you're simultaneously full and exhausted, uncertain whether to compliment the chef or apologise to your digestive system. The staff sweeps away the plates as if erasing all evidence of excess, and you're left staring at your third clean plate, wondering how on earth you're supposed to fit into your waistcoat by lunch. As you rise from the table, you marvel at the sheer effort it takes to eat like the elite. Breakfast in the Gilded Age isn't just the most important meal of the day, it's an endurance sport. And somewhere, deep down, you find yourself longing for the simple pleasure of cereal in your pyjamas, unaccompanied by the threat of a minor international incident over the proper use of a grapefruit spoon. You don't lift a finger unless it's to summon someone else to do it for you. Your household is a well-oiled and heavily unionized machine. Butlers, maids, footmen, cooks, florists, dog walkers, and one guy who just polishes the doorknobs. Every bell means someone is sprinting down the hallway in terror. In the Gilded Age, running a mansion isn't just a matter of keeping the windows clean and the icebox stocked. It's a high-stakes exercise in logistics and diplomacy, with a cast of dozens, or even hundreds, working behind the scenes to ensure you never have to pour your own coffee, button your own cuffs, or, heaven forbid, encounter dust. There are so many uniforms under your roof. Your morning lineup could be mistaken for the opening ceremony of the Olympics, only with less athleticism and more passive-aggressive curtsies. Your butler, let's call him Mr. Forsyth, is the ringmaster of this domestic circus. He's the only person allowed to speak with both the upstairs family and the downstairs staff without anyone breaking into a cold sweat. Mr. Forsyth knows everything. When the caviar is running low, which cousin is about to elope, and exactly how many inches the tablecloth should drape over the edge for a Tuesday brunch. He moves through the house with the stealth and gravitas of a Victorian panther, occasionally appearing at your elbow to inform you, in hushed and slightly judgmental tones, that your afternoon tea has been ever so slightly delayed by a matter of utmost importance involving a missing geranium. The housemaids, meanwhile, glide about with dusters and buckets, tidying up after you with such efficiency that you could swear the house is self-cleaning. Pillows are plumped the moment your back is turned. Chandeliers are polished until you can see your own startled reflection from 20 feet away. The floors are so spotless, you'd be nervous about walking on them if you didn't know there was a maid whose sole responsibility is to buff out the footprints after you've passed through. Let's not forget the footman, whose main job appears to be opening doors and standing impressively still. You have a small army of these statuesque fellows, all over 6 feet tall, and chosen for their ability to wear livery and not faint during long stretches of silence. Their duties are shrouded in mystery. 1 minute they're lighting lamps, the next they're holding the dog's leash while it contemplates life's big questions at the end of the marble corridor. And the cook. The cook. This is the generalissimo of the kitchen, ruling over a hot and bustling underworld with an iron whisk and the temperament of a Shakespearean villain. The cook doesn't just prepare meals, they orchestrate feasts. Your breakfast alone takes a team of 7, and the soufflé for tonight's dinner is guarded more closely than your family's reputation. There's always a crisis brewing. Someone burnt the scones, the fishmonger is late, or, worst of all, the chocolate delivery has been misrouted to New Jersey. Beyond the main staff, your home employs a dizzying array of specialists. A florist who freshens the arrangements in every room and sniffs suspiciously at your tasting chrysanthemums. A dog walker who gossips with the stable boy about the house across the street. A lamplighter, a laundress, and a coachman who looks permanently traumatized by the family's obsession with last-minute trips to Newport. There's even a silverman whose job is to polish the endless parade of trays, teapots, and gravy boats until they shine with the regret of 1,000 missed investment opportunities. All these people live, work, and sometimes even sleep within the house's labyrinthine service quarters, a world parallel to yours filled with coded glances, whispered rumours, and the ever-present dread of a surprise inspection. Servant hierarchy is real and fierce, maiden squabbles over who gets to dust the drawing room, footmen practising their tray balancing, and the butler keeping careful notes on who forgot to refill the sherry decanter. For you, managing all this is as easy as ringing a bell. For your staff, it's a never-ending ballet performed in starched uniforms, with the ever-looming threat of a family emergency, which, in Gilded Age terms, could mean anything from a spilled trifle to the arrival of an unannounced duke. In this world, you rule by remote control, and every ding, tinkle or call from upstairs sets 100 things in motion below, as your household scrambles to keep the machinery of luxury humming, silently, invisibly, and just out of sight. Bath time is less about cleanliness, and more about ritual humiliation by water. Your bathtub is 6 feet long, porcelain imported from France, filled with rose petals and possibly one confused goldfish. There's a perfumed soap for every limb, and drying off requires more towels than most people own in a lifetime. Before you even consider dipping a toe, the bathing ritual begins with a grand procession worthy of a coronation. First, the water must be fetched, not by you, of course, but by a team of housemaids and footmen who carry buckets up from the kitchen boiler in a parade of steam and groaning staircases. Each pail is checked for temperature, clarity, and, one suspects, whether the servants have secretly resented you for making them haul scalding water all morning. The final product is a tub so inviting it could tempt even the most dedicated germaphobe of the era. You don't simply undress, you are divested one layer at a time by a personal attendant who handles your silks and linens as if they're national treasures. There's a screen set up, theoretically for privacy, but mostly for effect, because nothing says modesty like an audience of servants pretending not to judge your sock tan. If you're particularly fashionable, you might insist on a scented bath, orange blossom, lavender, or that rare favourite, essence of unobtainable flower shipped at great expense from the Far East. Once you finally sink into the tub, surrounded by petals and hovering staff, you experience a brief moment of peace before realising there are, in fact, protocols for soaking. The bath is not a place for haste. You recline with your head propped up on a monogrammed cushion, contemplating whether your reflection in the bathroom mirror looks wealthier today than yesterday. Servants circle, offering up a dizzying array of sponges, loofahs and soaps, one for hands, one for face, one for feet, and one specialty bar made of goat's milk and pretension. There are, of course, obstacles to relaxation. Someone is always fussing over the water temperature. The window is thrown open to let the vapours escape, which mostly lets in a draught and a judgmental pigeon. At some point, you're offered a facial mask of honey and cucumber slices, which inevitably slide down your nose and into the water, joining the goldfish on its existential journey. You do your best to appear serene while internally composing a letter to the manufacturer about improving the viscosity of cucumber. Bathing is also a group effort in the least social way imaginable. The housekeeper oversees proceedings from a respectful distance. The laundress prepares fresh towels, and the chambermaid stands by to help you in and out of the tub, making sure not to slip and bring shame upon her family for generations. There's no such thing as just a quick rinse. Each limb must be lathered, rinsed, and gently patted dry, lest you emerge with a single speck of dust, a scandal worthy of the society pages. When it's time to get out, there's a towel for everything, one for your body, one for your feet, one for each arm, and one inexplicably small square that no one can quite explain. You're bundled like a newborn, enveloped in linens so plush they might qualify as mattresses elsewhere. A dressing gown is warmed by the fire, slippers are placed precisely where your feet will land, and a bottle of cologne or eau de toilette is presented for the finishing touch. You're now officially the cleanest person on the eastern seaboard. The bathwater is whisked away to be disposed of discreetly, presumably in a manner that does not offend the delicate sensibilities of the neighbourhood or the local trout. The staff disappears as quickly as they arrived, and you're left alone, cleaner than anyone truly needs to be, pondering the nature of luxury. In the Gilded Age, hygiene isn't just about scrubbing away yesterday's grime. It's about staging a personal renaissance every day, with rose petals, French porcelain, and the unspoken knowledge that somewhere a servant is rolling their eyes as you debate which soap makes you feel the most like Caesar. Clean, pampered, and slightly dizzy from the ordeal, you're ready to face another day, one bath closer to immortality, or at least another mention in the local society column for exceptional lustre and polish. Getting dressed is a test of endurance and lung capacity. Ladies risk spontaneous fainting from corset-induced hypoxia, while gentlemen live in fear of top hats catching on chandeliers. Accessories include monocles you never actually need, gloves you forget to take off, and shoes designed by people who hate feet. The Gilded Age may have been a golden era for industry, but for the human body it was a daily assault of starched linen and hubris, masquerading as high style. Take the corset, a device specifically engineered to remind you that breathing is optional. For women, this was less of an undergarment and more of a medieval punishment, constructed from whalebone, steel, and presumably the shattered dreams of comfort. The goal? To cinch the waist until you resemble an hourglass, or at least the part of an hourglass with a strong opinion on fainting couches. Morning begins with your maid lacing you up as if she's preparing you for a jousting tournament. You grip the bedpost she pulls, and together you silently pray that breakfast will be soft and the day free of stares. Every deep breath becomes a calculated risk, and the mere mention of tennis on the lawn is enough to induce a bout of delicate nerves. Sitting is an ordeal, standing is a chore, and lying down requires the careful alignment of pillows and the kind of strategy that wins chess matches. Gentlemen, meanwhile, are not spared the tortures of fashion. The Gilded Age top hat is less a hat, and more a mobile penthouse suite for your head. It's crafted from silk, lacquer, and social anxiety, standing so tall that one wrong step could set off a domino effect involving chandeliers, candelabras, and the family's prized peacock. Removing the hat is an elaborate dance. Lift with confidence, never reveal hat hair, and please, whatever you do, don't drop it. If you do, the butler must recover it using tongs, lest your social standing plummet along with the headwear. Accessories are their own minefield. The monocle, for instance, is an enigma. Is it for vision, intimidation, some sort of early warning device for incoming drama? Most men simply perch it on their cheek, peer at the world with one squinty eye, and then lose it at the first sign of vigorous nodding. Gloves are mandatory for both sexes, but they're seldom on the correct hands for long. You're forever removing them, tucking them into hats, forgetting them in carriages, or, most dangerously, wearing them while attempting to eat soup, resulting in more ruined silk than a moth convention. And then there's the velvet. Oh, the velvet! In theory, it's the fabric of royalty, a symbol of luxury and refinement. In practice, it's a lint magnet with a personal vendetta. The moment you step outside, every stray bit of fluff, pet hair, or airborne pastry crumb clings to you for dear life. By the time you reach the front door, you resemble a walking tapestry documenting everything you've passed that morning. Dark colours hide nothing, and lighter hues make you look like a poorly frosted cake. Every few steps, your valet appears with a brush, waging a hopeless war against the forces of static electricity. Shoes? The less said, the better. Ladies' boots come with buttons so tiny they require a special hook and a master's degree in patience. Men's dress shoes are so pointy they could double as weapons in a pinch, and the soles are designed to amplify the sound of your own existential dread as you teeter through marble hallways. Comfort is not just sacrificed, it's thrown from the roof with great ceremony. All the while you're trailed by a faint scent of lavender sachets, meant to disguise the underlying panic sweat, and haunted by the knowledge that every stitch, buckle and accessory is a potential hazard. A sudden movement could send a button flying, a corset lacing could snap, or worst of all, a rival could point out that this season's cuff design is already quite passé. In the Gilded Age, looking elegant is a full-contact sport. You're not just getting dressed, you're entering the ring armed with bravado pins and just enough oxygen to make it to dinner. If you survive without a wardrobe malfunction or public fainting, you've already beaten the odds, and maybe, just maybe, you'll live to fight another day of fashion. Your day begins with a stack of calling cards the size of a paperback novel. Social visits are governed by rules more complex than modern tax law. One wrong move and you're persona non grata, left to contemplate your disgrace over a tepid cup of tea. You stare at the ornate pile of little rectangles, each one heavier than it should be, embossed, gilded, sometimes even perfumed, all fighting for attention in a game you never agreed to play. Your own calling card is a masterpiece, thick as a shortbread biscuit, engraved with a font so fancy it's only readable under direct sunlight and with a magnifying glass. Every detail is a coded message: your name, your titles, your address. The big house on the hill near the fountain, just ask the butler, and most importantly, whether you're the kind of person who calls in person or sends their footman to do the heavy lifting. Before you've even finished your morning chocolate, the first cards arrive, delivered on silver trays by servants whose expressionless faces could serve as poker lessons. Mrs. Havermeyer has called at precisely 10:17, leaving behind a card trimmed in blue. This means she expects a visit within 2 days, or you'll be quietly erased from her invitation list for the season. Lady Van Rensselaer has sent her regrets for not being able to call, which, as everyone knows, is code for "I saw what happened at your dinner party, and I have not forgiven you for the aspic incident." Every call must be answered, but not every call is equal. You can't simply waltz into someone's parlour on a whim. There's a schedule, a sacred calendar maintained by butlers, gossiped over by housemaids, and feared by all. Mondays are for morning visits. Tuesdays are reserved for people you secretly hope will decline. By Wednesday, you're already 3 days behind, and the entire city is bracing for the fallout if the wrong person is overlooked. Social standing is measured in return visits, the thickness of one's calling card, and the number of trays one's butler can balance at once. There's also a secret language to how cards are presented. Folded corners mean congratulations on your engagement, but only if you stay in your lane. A card with just a last name, nothing else, is the ultimate power move. Either you know who they are or you're not worth knowing. Leave a card yourself and you must never, ever hand it over personally. That's what the footman is for, poor soul. He'll be the one left lingering in the entry hall, shifting awkwardly, as the recipient's butler inspects the tray like a customs officer on high alert. Once admitted for a visit, you're seated with military precision in the parlour, an awkward 3 feet away from your hostess. Conversation topics are as strictly managed as the royal finances: weather, the opera, charitable causes, and perhaps a sly mention of the latest Newport scandal if you're feeling daring. One must never broach business, politics, or, heaven forbid, personal feelings. Should the conversation lag, your hostess can simply ring for more tea, or, in a crisis, pretend she hears her poodle barking. The duration of a visit is tightly regulated. Too short and you seem aloof. Too long and you're a bore. The sweet spot is 15 minutes, enough time to comment on the roses, compliment the embroidery, and deliver your gossip without being caught. At the end, you stand, exchange a final volley of pleasantries, and retreat, hoping you've neither offended nor underwhelmed. As you leave, the butler presents you with a tiny, inscrutable smile. He knows who's in and who's out. He knows everything. Fail at any point in this delicate ballet, and you're cast out. No more invitations, no more gossip, no more hope of advancing beyond that person who wore last season's gloves. Reputation here is as fragile as the fine bone china, and twice as likely to be shattered. In the Gilded Age, social hierarchy isn't just about money or family. It's a blood sport played with cardboard, courtesy, and nerves of steel, and all before your second cup of tea. You don't walk, you promenade. Fifth Avenue is your runway, and every passerby is both an audience and a judge. Ladies swan by in hats the size of wagon wheels, while men tip their canes at anything that moves. Your carriage alone has more horsepower than a city bus. This isn't an errand, it's an event. As you emerge from your mansion's marble entrance, the footman sweeps open the door with a bow usually reserved for royalty. Your carriage gleams, lacquered to such a shine it threatens to blind any bystander who dares gaze upon it directly. The horses are plumed, the harnesses are polished, and your coachman's uniform is so starched it could stand up on its own. Even your little lapdog perched at your side is sporting a ribbon that cost more than some people's week's wages. Fifth Avenue at mid-morning is less a street and more a living catwalk. The air is thick with anticipation and the faint scent of imported lavender. Everyone knows the game. You're here to see and be seen. Ladies parade in gowns that could be mistaken for entire upholstery departments. Satin, lace, brocade, all rustling together in a thunderous symphony of swish. The hats alone are an architectural marvel. Some boast birds' nests, stuffed pheasants, or enough ostrich feathers to make you question the local wildlife population. Balancing these marvels requires a special sort of posture. Chin high, eyes forward, and the kind of neck strength usually reserved for professional wrestlers. Gentlemen are no less competitive, marching in frock coats that brush the tops of their patent leather shoes, gloves spotless, cravats starched within an inch of their lives. Top hats are tall enough to cause issues with low-hanging branches and the occasional trolley wire. Every hand sports a cane, some carved from ivory, others topped with jewels, and a few clearly designed to double as defensive weapons should a duel break out over a social slight. As you glide along the avenue, you're accompanied by the steady, rhythmic clatter of horseshoes and carriage wheels. The sidewalks are a moving tapestry of gossip and spectacle. You nod, you smile, you offer just enough eye contact to be polite, but not so much that it implies desperation. Social status is measured in the subtlety of your glances and the confidence of your stride. Never hurry, only the newly rich rush. You, on the other hand, move with the regal indifference of a person who knows they have nowhere better to be. Storefronts line the avenue, each more ostentatious than the last. Tiffany's, Lord & Taylor, a jeweller whose window display could finance a small European war. You may pause to peer at the latest Parisian imports. or linger in front of the florist display, all the while pretending not to notice the crowd of lesser mortals peering curiously at your every move. Heaven help you if your outfit isn't in keeping with the latest Paris trend. The ripple of whispered critiques can travel faster than a telegraph. Occasionally the promenade halts as two social juggernauts meet mid-pavement, forced into an awkward dance of polite conversation, feathered hats bobbing, canes tapping in a delicate duel of etiquette. Lovely day for it, isn't it? One ventures, knowing full well that the true weather report can be found in the colour of Mrs. Astor's gloves. Children, if present, are marched along like miniature mannequins, silent, immaculately dressed, and strictly forbidden from running or expressing any sort of joy. Dogs are the only creatures allowed any personality, yapping from their velvet cushions or peering out the windows of tiny dog carriages, which, yes, are also a thing. As you reach the end of your circuit, your cheeks ache from the polite half-smile, your feet throb in shoes never meant for actual movement, and your soul is both weary and inflated by the exhausting pageantry. You've successfully survived Fifth Avenue's social gauntlet, your dignity intact and your outfit, mostly, unrumpled. Back home, you collapse into a velvet chair and breathe a sigh of relief. It's only noon, and already you've attended the most judgmental parade New York has ever seen, and tomorrow you'll do it all over again, assuming you haven't been upstaged by a rival's hat the size of a canoe. Lunch isn't a meal. It's a multi-act opera starring jellied meats, aspic, and a waiter who knows French better than you. Salads are architectural, desserts are on fire, and the only thing forbidden is simplicity. You'll spend more time reading the menu than eating. The first act begins as you take your seat in a dining room designed to intimidate. The table stretches for days, covered in starched white linen, cut glass goblets, and a battalion of silverware laid out with military precision. You have a place card, naturally, because finding your own seat is for peasants. Before you even settle, a footman swoops in with a napkin so large it might double as a sail and gently lays it across your lap as if tucking in a very dignified toddler. The menu is in French, of course. English is reserved for talking to dogs and issuing stern warnings to the children. You nod knowingly, pretending potage à la reine means something other than broth that has seen a chicken from a safe distance. As the soup arrives, you gingerly select the correct spoon. Hint, it's not the one you instinctively reach for. Conversation is muted so as not to offend the soufflé, which according to rumour is sensitive to both noise and criticism. Next comes the parade of jellied meats, a true Gilded Age staple. Nothing says opulence like calf's foot suspended in aspic, glistening like a festive trauma. Your hostess insists you try the aspic, beaming as if she personally invented gelatin. You smile bravely, wondering if anyone in history has ever truly enjoyed eating meat that wobbles. The answer, if you look around the table, is no, but everyone agrees it's so continental. By the second course, the salad arrives, not in a bowl, but as a vertical marvel that looks more like a botanical garden than anything edible. Lettuce towers reach precarious heights, speared with radishes carved into swans and carrots, whittled into the shapes of historical figures. The dressing is delivered with a flourish and a warning. Too much, and you risk drowning the architecture. Too little, and you appear unenthusiastic, which in this crowd is practically a crime. Now, for the pièce de résistance, the entrée, duck à l'orange, roast pheasant, or perhaps lobster Newburg, each served with sauces whose names you dare not pronounce, and whose ingredients remain a closely guarded secret. Side dishes are equally elaborate, potatoes sculpted into roses, carrots glazed until they sparkle, and string beans lined up in formation. You're not entirely convinced you aren't being judged on your fork technique by the waitstaff, who serve with the solemn air of surgeons and the discretion of spies. Dessert is where restraint finally collapses in a sugar-induced frenzy. Enter the flaming pudding, wheeled out with enough brandy to set the house ablaze. There are pies with crusts so intricately braided you suspect witchcraft, towers of spun sugar, and cakes that require both an engineer and a mathematician to slice. The dessert forks, yes, more forks, are exchanged with the choreography of a ballet, and woe betide anyone who takes the wrong one. In some households it's grounds for a duel. All the while the wine flows, a different bottle for every course, each one described in loving detail by a sommelier whose moustache could anchor a ship. You sip, nod, and attempt to hide the fact that after 5 courses you'd trade it all for a sandwich and a nap. When at last the meal ends, you feel equal parts triumphant and utterly defeated. You've survived the menu, the spectacle, and the suspicion that you're still wearing half your entree somewhere on your waistcoat. The plates are whisked away, the tablecloth is inspected for casualties, and you rise slightly heavier, slightly wiser, and in awe of the sheer force of will it takes to eat like a Gilded Age aristocrat. Lunch, you realise, is not about nourishment. It's about endurance, appearance, and giving the servant something to gossip about until dinner. And as you discreetly loosen your corset or unbutton your vest beneath the table, you privately vow to never again take the humble ham sandwich for granted. With all this staff, you have nothing to do but invent hobbies. Croquet on the lawn, falconry on the roof, perhaps a gentle round of yacht racing. If you get really bored, you can always found a museum or start a feud with the Vanderbilts. Afternoons in the Gilded Age are an exercise in making idleness look like accomplishment. After all, you can't be expected to manage the family fortune. That's what lawyers and disappointed sons-in-law are for. So, with the hard work of breakfast and lunch behind you, it's time to pursue leisure, which, for the elite, means engaging in activities so elaborately pointless they require specialized equipment, custom uniforms, and at least one person whose sole job is to carry your hat. Croquet is the darling of the afternoon, a game that combines all the excitement of slow-motion polo with the politics of a small nation. The lawn is groomed to within an inch of its life, wetter than the English countryside, flatter than a scandal swept under the rug. You grasp your mallet, don a hat large enough to create its own weather system, and prepare for a round that's less about sport and more about strategic snubbing. Cheating is impossible. There's always a footman or two to adjudicate, and anyway, the real goal is to gracefully outlast your rivals while pretending not to care. For those with a flair for the dramatic, there's falconry. Yes, falconry, because what better way to spend an idle hour than donning a leather gauntlet, summoning a bird of prey, and staring soulfully into its eyes while the neighbours pretend not to be terrified. The family's falconer, a grizzled fellow with a mysterious past and a hat covered in bird droppings, assures you this is the hobby of royalty. You try not to flinch as your trained falcon, who is definitely not considering eating your lapdog, takes flight, circles the rooftop, and immediately lands on the head of the nearest marble statue. Close enough. On days when the weather is perfect, you might indulge in a little yachting. This is not boating, mind you. Boating is for people who have to tie their own knots. Yacht racing requires a full crew, coordinated outfits, and a vessel named after a Shakespearean character, or your third favourite aunt. The competition is fierce, not because anyone particularly cares who wins, but because the post-race luncheon comes with medals, gossip, and the opportunity to wear navy blazers with a sense of entitlement only found at sea. If the outdoors fails to amuse, there's always the grand tradition of collecting. You can start with butterflies, move on to Egyptian mummies, highly fashionable, slightly cursed. Or, if truly ambitious, begin assembling enough Renaissance art to justify opening a museum. In fact, why not open a museum? It gives you a reason to travel, a place to stash your impulse purchases, and a legitimate excuse to be photographed in front of things you don't fully understand. Some days the drama is closer to home. With leisure time comes the subtle art of the social feud. The Vanderbilts, Astors and Rockefellers all play, and the rules are simple. Acquire something bigger, grander or more French than your rivals, then invite them over to feel quietly inferior. This can escalate from new marble staircases to rival charity balls to, in extreme cases, dueling oratorios performed in your living room by imported Italian tenors. The stakes? Eternal social glory and at least one entry in the New York Times Society column. Of course, these pastimes require preparation. There are committees to chair, invitations to oversee and staff to organise. Your butler becomes a project manager. The chef is pressed into service to create snacks that can be eaten with one hand, and the groundskeepers work overtime to repair the lawn after the latest croquet massacre. By late afternoon, you've exhausted yourself with exertion by proxy and are more than ready for tea. As you recline in the shade watching the sun glint off your trophy or your falcon, now menacing the neighbour's cat, you reflect on another successful day of aimless achievement. In the Gilded Age, leisure isn't about relaxation. It's about spectacle, subtle warfare, and occasionally not being outdone by the family next door. You could just let the servants carry you everywhere, but exercise is fashionable. A brisk game of tennis played in full formal wear. Maybe a little fencing or horse riding on a perfectly manicured lawn. No actual perspiration allowed, of course. In the Gilded Age, the pursuit of health and vigour is less about getting fit, and more about being seen getting fit, preferably without ever wrinkling your shirt front. Exercise is the latest social craze, recommended by doctors, society columnists, and distant cousins who've taken the grand tour. But don't expect any of that huffing, puffing or sweating you might see at the local YMCA. Here, exertion must be tightly controlled, artfully accessorised, and preferably witnessed by someone who can vouch for your athleticism at the next dinner party. The first stop on your wellness journey is the tennis court. It's not so much a court as it is a sculpture garden, clipped hedges, marble statues, the odd peacock for ambience. You arrive in your tennis whites, which include enough starched fabric to sail a schooner. For ladies, this means long skirts and blouses with puffed sleeves, secured at the neck with a cameo and just enough whalebone in the corset to render deep breaths hazardous. Men, of course, must wear jackets and neckties, because if you're not on the verge of heat stroke, are you even trying? The game itself is less Wimbledon, more strategic languor. You stand at the net, racket dangling like a prop in a Victorian play, and gently tap the ball back and forth, careful not to muss your hair. The pace is just slow enough that a servant can retrieve any stray balls, while the real workout comes from mastering the art of the polite laugh when your opponent flubs a shot. Should you actually feel your heart rate increase, it's time to call for lemonade and fan yourself in the shade while loudly declaring, "What splendid exercise this is." If tennis isn't your style, there's always fencing. In theory, fencing is the sport of aristocrats, elegant, refined, and just dangerous enough to suggest you've read too many novels about duels at dawn. You don the full regalia, fitted jacket, padded gloves, and a mask that makes you look like an extremely wealthy beekeeper. A professional fencing master is brought in, preferably with a French accent, and you spend 30 minutes parrying and thrusting while the staff looks on, wondering if anyone will ever actually land a hit. The real victory? Making it through the lesson without getting so much as a grass stain. On fine afternoons you may be encouraged to ride. Not out into the wilds, of course, just a gentle trot around the estate, over ground so meticulously groomed that the horses wear white gloves. Well, almost. Side saddle for ladies, naturally, because nothing says robust health like balancing atop a 1,000-pound animal while laced into a corset. Men prefer to look heroic astride their mounts, breeches spotless, boots polished, and the breeze just tousling their hair to romantic effect. Actual galloping is discouraged. It's noisy, dusty, and could lead to an unseemly flush. Other activities round out the day, perhaps a session of archery, the arrows have been pre-aligned for ease of success, or an hour with the newfangled exercise machines that promise health without sweat. Imagine rowing machines and dumbbells made of polished mahogany, handled just long enough for a photograph. All the while, attendants stand ready with towels, refreshments, and emergency supplies of smelling salts, should anyone's pulse dare to rise above the approved range. And when you return indoors, a maid is waiting to help you change back into your afternoon loungewear, which looks suspiciously like your morning attire but with more embroidery. By the end of this rigorous routine, you feel energized, accomplished, and crucially, still perfectly presentable. Exercise in the Gilded Age is less about breaking a sweat and more about breaking up the day. If you do it right, the only thing that's truly exhausted is your patience for the next person who claims they once walked all the way to Central Park on foot. It's time for a little retail therapy at the latest department store, where the only thing longer than the aisles is your receipt. You purchase hats you'll never wear, shoes that don't fit, and enough trinkets to fill a small museum, all while never touching your own wallet. The Gilded Age department store is less a shop and more a monument to temptation. Stepping inside, you're greeted not by a simple bell, but by a uniformed doorman who sweeps open the doors as if you're the star attraction in an opera, because in this world, you are. The floor sparkles, chandeliers glitter overhead, and the scent of newly unpacked luxury mingles with the faint aroma of desperation from last season's sale rack. Your personal shopping assistant materializes within moments, eyes bright with the prospect of a commission, ready to lead you on a tour of excess. Shopping here is a performance art. Each department is its own little kingdom, staffed by experts who will not only address you as madam or sir, but also flatter your taste, your reputation, and possibly your poodle. You start with hats. Not because you need another one, your closet already resembles a small millinery, but because it's simply tradition. The latest Parisian creations loom before you, some feathered, some bejeweled, and all structurally unsound in a strong wind. The milliner floats by, whispering that the lavender plumes are simply all the rage in Paris this season, and you nod sagely, having already forgotten last season's colour entirely. Next come the shoes. Logic has no place here. You try on delicate Italian slippers and marvel at how dainty they look. Never mind that you can't actually stand in them for more than 30 seconds without risking a minor orthopedic crisis. Your shopping assistant reassures you that comfort is a vulgar concept, best left to country relatives. A pair of boots with mother-of-pearl buttons catches your eye. They are, your assistant insists, utterly indispensable. You're not sure why, but they're boxed up before you can object. Onward to gloves, scarves, and the ever-important parasol section. Here, you ponder the merits of hand-embroidered lace versus imported silk, finally selecting one of each, because who can say what the weather may bring? Trinkets and novelties are scattered throughout, gold-plated opera glasses, ivory-handled fans, a tiny porcelain pig that serves no purpose except to amuse your dinner guests. Everything is irresistible, especially the promise that your purchases will be delivered directly to your home by tea time, at the very latest. Gentlemen are equally swept up in the madness. Cufflinks shaped like miniature horses, walking sticks with secret compartments, cravats in shades that defy the natural world, each item carefully laid out by a clerk who addresses your opinions as if you're a foreign dignitary. The only real struggle is acting as though you've given the choice deep consideration, rather than simply nodding at the shiniest object within reach. Payment is an abstraction, handled by your assistant with the wave of a discreetly monogrammed charge account. Actual cash is never seen, mentioned, or even imagined. Money exists somewhere in the ether, presumably managed by bank clerks with strong backs and weak nerves. Your only task is to sign a ledger with a flourish, and accept the flurry of compliments on your exquisite taste. The shopping experience is punctuated by refreshments. A tea room waits upstairs, where you recover from your ordeal with finger sandwiches and delicate cakes, occasionally interrupted by the arrival of yet another box from the glove counter. Conversation drifts toward the topic of who was seen buying what, and whether anyone has been so gauche as to carry their own packages. By the end of the afternoon, you leave in a carriage weighed down by parcels and the deep, soul-numbing knowledge that you have contributed, yet again, to the ongoing expansion of your wardrobe and the slow, inevitable collapse of your closet shelves. In the Gilded Age, shopping isn't just a pastime, it's a sport, a statement, and the most socially acceptable way to lose track of both time and money, all while keeping your hands clean. Why turn a light on yourself when you could have an electrified butler do it? The Gilded Age is all about innovation you don't need. Talking tubes, automatic pianos, and personal iceboxes big enough to chill your ego. You're not showing off, you're advancing society. Sort of. In the world of the Gilded Age elite, progress means never having to do anything with your own two hands. The moment a new contraption is invented, no matter how unnecessary, you simply must have it. The first electric bell system? Installed in every room. The fact that half your staff still responds faster to a polite cough than a clanging bell is beside the point. Your mansion's walls are a maze of wires, tubes, and mysterious levers, all there to make life easier, or at the very least, much noisier. Let's start with the communication system. In theory, speaking tubes connect every room, allowing you to bellow instructions directly to the kitchen, the stables, or the greenhouse, should your orchids require an urgent pep talk. In practice, you find yourself blowing repeatedly into a brass mouthpiece, hoping the cook hears you over the din of clanging pots and the daily existential crisis in the scullery. Sometimes messages are garbled. Once, you requested a cup of tea and ended up with a confused gardener wielding a watering can and a strong opinion on azaleas. Lighting is the next marvel. Gone are the days of simple candles. Now you've invested in electric lights, gas lights, and an elaborate chandelier that requires its own engineering degree to operate. There's a switch for every occasion. Dinner, dancing, dramatic revelations, or the quick, "the asters are coming" setting. Of course, the wiring is still new technology, so every flick of a switch comes with a healthy dose of suspense. Will you illuminate the room, or plunge the entire house into darkness, sending the butler scrambling for matches? It's a gamble, one that keeps the evenings lively. Then there's the player piano, the pride of every parlour. With the crank of a lever, music pours forth, Chopin, Strauss, or, on rare occasions, a ragtime piece your great-aunt calls positively scandalous. The piano doesn't just play, it serenades, impresses guests, and gives the staff a break from endless renditions of Beautiful Dreamer. You never have to lift a finger, just sit back and pretend you could have played it yourself, had you not been so busy with, well, everything else. In the kitchen, the latest wonder is the personal icebox. Not just a humble block of ice and a hope for the best. No, this is a refrigerated behemoth, imported from Chicago, big enough to store a week's worth of leftovers and your cousin's secret whiskey stash. The delivery of ice alone is a spectacle. Burly men with tongs parade through your back door, while the cook mutters about the old days and you wonder if the household really needs 3 separate compartments for cheese. Of course, not every gadget is strictly practical. There's the mechanical birdcage in the drawing room, complete with a wind-up canary that sings "God Save the Queen" if you squint and use your imagination. The smoking room boasts an automatic cigar cutter, which is mostly good for terrifying the staff and occasionally launching cigar tips at unsuspecting guests. You even have a machine that froths milk for your coffee, because stirring is for the working class. No Gilded Age home is complete without a telephone, that most modern of marvels. Never mind that you only know 3 people with phones, and connecting a call requires speaking with an operator named Mabel, who is deeply invested in the plot lines of your family's social life. Still, you answer with gravitas, Hello? Yes, this is the future speaking. It's mostly static and polite confusion, but it's all terribly impressive. These gadgets aren't just conveniences, they're statements. Proof you're on the cutting edge, regardless of whether you have any idea how to use half the things cluttering up the hallways. And if something goes wrong, there's always a handyman, or more likely a team of frantic servants to blame. In the Gilded Age, technology is less about need and more about never being left behind in the relentless race to one-up your neighbours, even if that means electrifying your butler. Your dog eats better than most people, and your cat has its own diamond collar. Pet parrots squawk insults in 3 languages. You commission a portrait for your goldfish, because nothing says old money like giving a lizard its own chaise lounge. In the Gilded Age, a house isn't a home unless it's filled with animals that have better wardrobes and more social standing than some distant cousins. To be truly fashionable, you must amass a menagerie so well pampered that the ASPCA sends you thank you notes. The family dog isn't just a mutt, it's a pedigreed poodle, brushed, bowed, and perfumed within an inch of its dignity. Breakfast is a bowl of beef consommé, lovingly ladled by the chef, who sometimes wonders when he'll be allowed to cook for the humans again. Felines, too, are elevated to near royalty. Your pampered Persian naps atop embroidered silk cushions in sunbeams specially scheduled for her comfort. Her collar is set with more diamonds than your engagement ring, and her daily routine involves a rotation of hand-fed delicacies and the odd live canary. Purely for exercise, of course. If she deigns to grace your lap, the household halts, lest anyone disturb her meditation on the tragic limitations of modern luxury. The aviary in the morning room is its own social hub. Here, parrots shriek gossip picked up from the servants, often in embarrassing detail and always at the worst possible moment. One bird, acquired at great expense from Brazil, greets guests with a perfect imitation of your aunt's laughter, while another calls the butler by a nickname he'd hoped you'd never learn. It's rumoured that Mrs. Astor's macaw can recite Shakespeare, but yours settles for "Where's my breakfast?" in flawless French. Not to be outdone, the aquariums and terrariums showcase the latest aquatic and reptilian fashions. Goldfish glide through marble fountains, each one more delicate than the last, and woe to the servant who fails to change their water daily. No one wants a scandal. You hire an artist to immortalise your prizefish in oils, ensuring its goggle-eyed stare will haunt future generations from over the mantelpiece. The household lizard, meanwhile, reclines on a miniature chaise lounge, resplendent in a custom velvet cape. He's a count, you explain to visitors, as if this makes perfect sense. Exotic pets are all the rage. If your neighbour acquires a sphinx cat, you respond with a pair of Angora rabbits, each with its own silk-lined hutch. There are stories of families keeping peacocks, monkeys, and even baby alligators for the express purpose of outquirking the Joneses. One socialite famously brought a goat to tea, which promptly ate half a centrepiece and was immediately hailed as the life of the party. Pet care, naturally, requires an army of staff. The dog walker arrives at dawn, the cat's valet polishes her collar, and the parrot's language tutor visits every Thursday. There's a veterinarian on retainer, a falconer for those afternoons when nothing but a hawk will do, and a seamstress specialising in animal attire. You don't just dress for dinner, your pets do too. If the dog's cravat is wrinkled, the consequences are dire. Pet birthday parties become legendary affairs. Invitations are engraved, the guest list is fiercely curated, and the menu features liver pâté and tiny cakes shaped like bones. There are prizes for best tail wag and most expressive plumage, and the winning goldfish receives a wreath of imported seaweed. Guests leave with party favours, miniature brushes, catnip cigars, and, if you're truly generous, a hand-drawn sketch of the honoree. At the end of the day, your pampered pets retire to their private suites, attended by staff and serenaded by a gramophone playing La Traviata. In the Gilded Age, being rich isn't enough. you must also be adored by creatures who ignore you most of the time. And honestly, what higher social achievement is there than being outshone by your own parrot at dinner? Every afternoon, the drawing room transforms into a high-stakes gossip coliseum. You pretend to sip tea while eavesdropping on scandals that would make your lawyer blush. The only thing sharper than the cheese knives are the rumours about Mrs. Astor's hair. Tea time in the Gilded Age is less about refreshment and more about reputation management. By 3 o'clock, the finest porcelain is deployed. The drawing room is filled with the scent of fresh lilies and intrigue, and a battalion of servants arranges the cakes, tarts and sandwiches with the precision of a military operation. Invitations are sent days in advance, and the guest list is curated as ruthlessly as a secret society initiation. To be left off the list is to court social exile. Worse, perhaps, than showing up with last year's hat. You enter with your game face on. Tea time is not for the faint of heart or the easily scandalized. Conversation opens with pleasantries, weather, charities, perhaps a brief discussion of the merits of Earl Grey versus Darjeeling. But soon, the real business of the afternoon takes centre stage. The trading of secrets. The clink of porcelain is a signal. Coded glances ricochet around the room as the latest tidbit is unleashed. Who was spotted leaving Delmonico's at midnight? Who sent 3 dozen roses to the wrong address? And whose husband was seen arguing with a waiter in truly subpar French? You learn quickly that your social standing depends less on your pedigree and more on your ability to react appropriately to each revelation. A raised eyebrow for mild scandal, a delicate gasp for something juicier, and for the truly shocking, a discreet choking fit conveniently covered by a bite of scone. There is a fine line between being in the know and being known as a gossip, and it is usually drawn by the person with the best selection of petits fours. The food itself is a silent participant in the drama. The cakes are works of art, glazed, dusted and piped with more skill than many of the day's artists. Sandwiches are trimmed into geometric perfection, and there's always one daring creation, perhaps aspic in miniature, or a biscuit shaped like a scandalous duchess, that becomes the subject of whispered reviews. The tea flows, a parade of blends from India and China, each poured by the hostess with the solemnity of a confession. The servants are masters of discretion, gliding in and out of earshot, replenishing plates, and, if you listen closely, probably memorizing enough blackmail material to start a second career. They know who drinks their tea with lemon, delicate, who takes sugar, dangerously indulgent, and who stirs so aggressively you'd think they were venting last night's frustrations. The real theatre, however, is in the alliances and rivalries that play out between courses. Long-standing feuds can be softened with the right compliment on a hat, while new alliances are forged over shared amusement at a mutual acquaintance's blunder. Some guests strategize their seat near the hostess, ensuring first access to news and pastries, while others linger on the edges, catching whispers destined for no one in particular. As the clock ticks past 4, the intensity ramps up. There's always one last breathtaking reveal, a secret engagement, a discreet bankruptcy, or a sight-in of Mrs. Astor's hairdresser carrying a suspiciously large hatbox. Faces freeze, fans flutter, and for a moment, even the scones are forgotten. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, the room returns to polite laughter and the rustle of silk. The scandal is folded neatly away until the next gathering. When tea time ends, you rise, exchange air kisses, and vow to forget half of what you've heard. You step outside with your reputation, mostly intact, your mind buzzing with new gossip, and your pockets dangerously full of pastries for the carriage ride. In the Gilded Age, tea is never just tea, it's survival, sport, and the daily pageant where fortunes rise, fall, and occasionally get frosted with lemon icing. You're deeply committed to causes, especially the kind that require showing up in a carriage and having your photograph taken. Charity balls, fundraising teas, and the occasional heartfelt check, written with a flourish, and 2 witnesses. Philanthropy has never looked this good on a calling card. In the Gilded Age, the surest way to cement your status is to appear effortlessly benevolent, even if your primary sacrifice is the discomfort of sitting through a 4-hour banquet while wearing diamond earrings the size of grapes. Charitable giving is less about the actual work and more about the spectacle of being seen caring deeply, while ensuring your gloves remain spotless. After all, the only thing more prestigious than wealth is a reputation for using it for good, especially if that good comes with a press photographer and a flattering write-up in the society column. Your days are filled with the social sport of philanthropy. Invitations arrive by the dozen. Lady Spencer requests the pleasure of your company at the Orphans' Ball. The Animal Refuge Society begs you to attend a luncheon in support of neglected canaries. Some charities are genuine: hospitals, libraries, relief funds. But many are the social equivalent of competitive gardening. It's less about saving the world, more about ensuring your name appears in all the right ledgers, and that you're photographed standing next to Mrs. Vanderbilt's famously dazzling tiara. You prepare for the evening's gala with more care than you'd devote to a minor coronation. Dressmakers, hairstylists and jewellers converge to ensure you look suitably generous. You select your most dazzling tiara for maximum reflection under gaslight and ensure your spouse's cufflinks match the embroidered cause ribbons. Arriving at the event, you're whisked inside, announced at the top of the marble staircase, and ushered to your place at a table set for 40, surrounded by floral arrangements that could feed a small town. The first course is always soup, silent, dignified, easy to consume while nodding at fellow philanthropists. The conversation is a delicate dance. You must mention how touched you are by the charity's plight, with precisely the right amount of mist in your eyes. Reference the heartwarming story of a child or puppy you met just last week, and above all, sound modest about the size of your last donation. No one likes a braggart, but everyone loves a philanthropist who claims, "Oh, it was nothing," as the ink dries on a cheque large enough to buy Rhode Island. The highlight of the evening is the auction, conducted with military efficiency by a master of ceremonies whose main goal is to extract as much money as possible with the least embarrassment. Bidding wars erupt over dubious prizes, opera tickets, private boxes at the races, a slightly menacing porcelain monkey, because what you're really buying is bragging rights. Win an item, and you're obliged to act faintly embarrassed. Lose out, and you feign relief, murmuring, "It's for the children, after all." If you're truly committed to your public image, you'll organise your own event. This involves recruiting a committee of socially ambitious friends, endless meetings over tepid tea, and, inevitably, one dramatic falling out over napkin colours. The goal is to host a ball or bazaar so dazzling that the actual money raised becomes an afterthought. What matters is the coverage in the morning papers and the approving glances from your peers. Actual, hands-on volunteering is rare, though not unheard of. You might visit an orphanage once a year, trailing reporters and distributing oranges to bemused children who have no idea why you're dressed like a Christmas tree. The gesture is photographed, publicised, and quickly forgotten until next year's giving season. At the end of the day, you ride home in your carriage, arms weighed down with commemorative bouquets and ego buoyed by a dozen grateful speeches. You've given generously of your presence, your wardrobe, and occasionally your pocketbook. In the Gilded Age, philanthropy is the art of being seen doing good. You may not change the world, but you'll certainly look magnificent pretending to try. You have children, allegedly. They're mostly raised by governesses, nannies, and a fleet of tutors who ensure your offspring can recite Latin by age 6, but have never seen a public park. Bonding time consists of waving at them from the other end of a ballroom. Parenthood in the Gilded Age is an elaborate hands-off operation. The concept of quality time with your children is as foreign as the idea of eating dinner before 8. Instead, the family nursery is a parallel universe, located several floors and at least 2 marble corridors away from the master suite. Here, small humans are clothed in starched linen, trained in etiquette by formidable nannies, and given enough homework to prepare them for a future as either a diplomat or a prize-winning pianist, sometimes both if the schedule allows. From the very first wail, your child's days are governed by a strict hierarchy. The head nanny, her authority just shy of the Queen's, runs the show, supported by a cast of under-nannies, nursery maids, and the occasional nurse who specialises in both bandaging knees and brokering peace between duelling siblings. The governess, a figure shrouded in sensible wool and quiet resignation, appears each morning to instruct your heirs in history, French, geography, and, naturally, the art of balancing a book on one's head while curtsying. A typical day in the nursery is choreographed with military precision. Breakfast is consumed at a small child-sized table with napkins tucked so tightly you risk cutting off circulation to your chin. Lessons follow: French dictation, Latin conjugation, mathematics advanced enough to startle most adults, and perhaps a quick session on the pianoforte to develop character. Outdoor time, when it occurs, is tightly supervised and restricted to the private garden, where grass stains are considered a moral failing and climbing trees is strictly for the help. When you do encounter your progeny, it's often a carefully staged affair. You appear in the nursery to bestow a kiss upon a well-scrubbed forehead, then retreat before anyone has a chance to ask about your actual first name. Or perhaps your child is paraded into the drawing room during tea to demonstrate their progress. A recitation of ode on a Grecian urn, a perfectly executed curtsy, or, if particularly talented, a small violin piece performed for aunts who clap politely and whisper about the wisdom of not spoiling children with affection. The tutors, one for every conceivable subject, and some that seem invented just to keep the staff employed, arrive throughout the day. There is the mathematics tutor, a dour man with an endless supply of chalk. The elocution tutor, who corrects the family accent until no one sounds like they're from anywhere. And the fencing master, who insists that sabre lessons build discipline, though the only thing getting cut is the tension in the nursery. By age 12, your child speaks 3 languages, plays 2 instruments, and harbours a suspicion that you are, in fact, just a very well-dressed stranger. Nannies, meanwhile, are the true parental figures. They know each child's allergies, favourite bedtime story, and precisely how many minutes of good behaviour can be expected before chaos erupts. Their loyalty is legendary, their discipline unwavering. A child's tears are more likely to be met with a stern lecture than a cuddle, but a scraped knee earns the coveted treat of a peppermint and a story about the dangers of running with untied shoes. Actual family time, when it occurs, is ceremonial. The children are permitted to appear at dessert on holidays, where they are presented like small, nervous ambassadors before a council of elders. The experience is both thrilling and terrifying, and most children later remember it only as a blur of silverware, whispered reminders, and the smell of overcooked pudding. By the time they reach adulthood, Gilded Age children are well-mannered, well-read, and thoroughly convinced that parents are a rare but impressive species. You may not have tucked them in or helped with their sums, but you've given them every advantage money can buy, except perhaps the chance to actually know you. In this world, affection is measured in tutors, not time, and the bond between parent and child is as carefully maintained as the family silver, polished, admired, but rarely handled. The real sport of the season is finding the most lucrative match. Debutante balls are high-stakes meat markets, and eligible bachelors are hunted like exotic game. Dowries are negotiated in back rooms with more secrecy than most peace treaties. The Gilded Age marriage market is where society's brightest young things and their financially anxious families meet in a glorious collision of lace, ambition, and spreadsheets. For all its delicate trappings, chandeliers, orchestras, rose-scented invitations, everyone knows the truth. Romance is lovely, but a solid portfolio and a family name with the right consonant-to-vowel ratio are what really set the heart aflutter. It begins naturally with the debutante season, a whirlwind of balls, teas, luncheons, and carefully curated chance meetings. Debutantes draped in white, gloved to the elbow, and steeled for months of smiling until their faces cramp, are presented to society as if being auctioned at Sotheby's. Each dance is a potential negotiation. The waltz isn't just for fun, it's an opportunity to evaluate posture, teeth, and, most crucially, lineage. Mothers hover at the edges, eyes narrowed, mentally ranking the competition like thoroughbred trainers at the paddock. Eligible bachelors, meanwhile, prowl the ballroom with all the enthusiasm of foxes invited to a very formal hunt. Some are in it for the sport. Tall, charming, perhaps even fond of poetry. Others are the result of years of strategic inbreeding and possess the social skills of a slightly anxious statue. If a young man has a fortune, he can expect to be surrounded by debutantes with practiced laughs and an ability to discuss anything except politics, while their mothers orchestrate introductions with the efficiency of military tacticians. Behind the scenes, the real game unfolds. Dowries are discussed in parlours thick with cigar smoke and whispered urgency. One family might offer a substantial sum, but only if the groom's family agrees to include a Newport cottage in the deal. Others bargain over jewels, shares in railroads, or the all-important invitation to Mrs. Astor's annual ball. If the negotiations stall, there's always an aunt who will threaten to speak to the newspapers, a move as risky as it is deliciously dramatic. Reputation is everything. One ill-advised flirtation, a cousin scandal, or, heaven forbid, a financial hiccup can torpedo months of careful positioning. Family histories are combed through like tax returns. Is there a hint of French in the lineage? A suspicious gap in the family tree? If so, a swift campaign of distraction is mounted, perhaps a charitable act, a well-timed European vacation, or a spectacularly generous donation to the local hospital, all designed to make society forget any unfortunate whispers. Actual affection is not entirely off the table, but it's usually expected to follow the paperwork. On rare occasions, love and finance align, resulting in genuine joy and society's collective sigh of relief. More often, couples embark on their union with a sense of purpose, mutual respect, and a prenuptial agreement thick enough to stun an ox. The wedding itself is a production, flowers by the cartload, a cake taller than most guests, and a guest list carefully balanced to avoid sparking fresh feuds. For those on the outside, the season's gossip is a spectator sport. Who is secretly courting whom? Which family's fortune is built on sand? Which dowry comes with the most strings attached? The newspapers speculate, the servants eavesdrop, and society holds its breath, waiting to see which lucky pair will emerge triumphant from the social thunderdome. At the end of it all, when the last waltz has faded and the contracts are signed, the new couple sets off on a honeymoon, often chaperoned, of course, because true love is nothing without a witness and a carriage full of trunks. In the Gilded Age, the marriage market is less about happily ever after and more about strategic alliances, mutual benefit, and surviving the season with your pride and your bank account intact. Downstairs, the real drama unfolds. The staff have their own rules, alliances, and bitter rivalries. You, of course, are blissfully unaware unless someone drops the soufflé, at which point it's an international incident. Life below stairs in a Gilded Age mansion is its own bustling microcosm, a society every bit as structured, competitive, and fraught with intrigue as anything happening upstairs. If the world above glimmers with gaslight and gold leaf, the one below hums with clattering pots, whispered rumours, and the steady march of boots across stone floors. The strict hierarchy among the servants is both a comfort and a curse. Everyone knows their place, and woe to the underfootman who forgets it. At the top of this domestic pyramid sits the butler. He presides over the household staff with the gravitas of a minor monarch and the discretion of a graveyard. His uniform is always immaculate, his eyebrows always slightly disapproving, and his word is law. Should a maid misplace a silver spoon, or a footman scuff the banister, the butler's quiet rebuke carries more weight than 100 shouted orders. He is the bridge between worlds, the only one permitted to speak freely to both the masters and the maids, trusted with the wine keys and, more importantly, the household secrets. The housekeeper rules the female staff with equal authority. Part disciplinarian, part den mother, she keeps the maids in line and the linens crisp. She knows exactly how much flour is in the pantry, which scullery maid is sweet on which footman, and the fastest way to remove a red wine stain from white damask. Her word on matters of cleaning and comportment is final. A housekeeper with a sense of humour is a rare blessing. A housekeeper without one inspires terror. In the kitchen, the cook is a force of nature, loud, irritable, and wholly indispensable. The rest of the staff orbits her with caution, for the cook controls not only dinner, but also the mood of the entire household. If the soufflé falls or the roast burns, it can trigger a domino effect of panic, blame-shifting, and frantic cover-ups. In extreme cases, it can even cause the upstairs family to suspect that downstairs is not the harmonious, well-oiled machine it appears to be. Each maid, footman, and bootboy knows their role. Maids rise before dawn to light fires and polish silver. Footmen spend their days hauling coal, delivering messages and standing perfectly still during meals. The laundry maids, toiling in perpetual steam, have the best gossip. Nothing escapes their notice. Alliances form and dissolve over slights both real and imagined. The coveted role of lady's maid or valet is seen as the highest promotion. Competition is fierce, and sabotage, while frowned upon, is not unknown. Despite the hard work and rigid discipline, there's a sense of pride in service. Staff dinners are noisy affairs, laughter, bickering, and shared stories over hearty, if unremarkable, food. Birthdays are quietly celebrated, grievances aired after hours, and romances blossom in the glow of the kitchen fire or on forbidden late-night walks to the root cellar. Life is tough, but camaraderie makes it bearable. From below stairs, the family above seems equal parts absurd and unreachable. Their strange requests and shifting moods are analysed like weather patterns. Staff place bets on who will wear what to dinner, who will scandalise the city next, or when the new footman will finally drop a tray in front of the Duchess. The family's dramas are retold with embellishments and much rolling of eyes, because nothing says job security like a household too busy with their own affairs to notice who's really running the show. And should disaster strike, be it a burnt pudding, a missing cufflink, or the aforementioned soufflé catastrophe, the staff closes ranks. Mistakes are covered up, blame is cleverly redirected, and order is restored by supper. Because in the world below stairs, survival means teamwork, sharp wits, and the ability to carry 3 plates at once without a single jellied calamity hitting the marble floor. Evenings are for waltzing until your feet go numb and pretending you're not bored out of your mind. The masquerade ball is a sea of anonymity and accidental proposals. If you're not still dancing at sunrise, did you even attend? Nightfall in the Gilded Age signals the beginning of the real performance. Dinner is only the overture. The true spectacle begins once the sun has gone down and the gaslights flicker to life. Invitations, engraved, scented, and delivered by hand, have been circulating for weeks, and the guest list is a game of social chess that leaves at least one family locked in a feud until Easter. The evening wardrobe requires hours of preparation, gowns stitched with imported lace, jackets tailored so sharply you risk injury, and accessories so heavy you could anchor a steamship with your necklace alone. Arriving at a ball is its own drama. Your carriage inches along in a glittering queue, wheels crunching on gravel while you make final adjustments to your gloves and rehearse the correct order for polite greetings. The entrance hall glows with 1,000 candles, and the nervous anticipation of seeing who has outdone whom, this time with more orchids, more musicians, and possibly a new marble statue flown in from Florence. Coat and hat are surrendered to a battalion of footmen, your name is announced at the top of the staircase, and you descend into a swirling world of music, laughter, and expertly concealed ennui. The waltz is the main event. It's elegant, it's endless, and it's a tactical operation for both romance and reputation. The order of partners is decided with military precision, and everyone knows the risks. Choose badly and you're locked into 3 minutes of awkward small talk and toe-related casualties. Choose well, and you may secure gossip rights for a month. Dance cards fill quickly, traded and guarded like winning lottery tickets. If you're lucky, you catch the orchestra during a particularly spirited polka, where chaos reigns and no one notices your left foot has gone rogue. Of course, nothing beats the masquerade. There's freedom in anonymity, a chance to slip behind a mask, don a mysterious accent, and risk scandal without ever being truly identified, until, inevitably, someone's mask slips, and all pretense dissolves into laughter and accusations. Costumes are outlandish. Marie Antoinette dances with a Viking, Cleopatra discusses poetry with Benjamin Franklin, and somewhere in the corner, a rogue pirate tries to sneak off with the dessert tray. Half the evening is spent asking, "Who are you, really?" The other half is spent hoping your own disguise holds up until the grand unmasking at midnight. Midnight comes and goes, but the party shows no sign of stopping. The supper room opens, offering oysters, champagne, and that most vital of Gilded Age commodities, cold chicken. Debates about the relative merits of sorbet flavours are interrupted only by the announcement of cotillions, tableaux vivants, and in rare cases, impromptu proposals, some intended, some entirely accidental and requiring swift intervention from a chaperone with nerves of steel. By 2 a.m, the true survivors remain. Ladies dabbing their foreheads with lace handkerchiefs, gentlemen leaning heavily on canes, and musicians playing the 6th encore with desperate determination. Eyes are glazed, feet are battered, and laughter becomes a little looser, the lines between sincerity and sarcasm blurring with every glass of punch. As dawn threatens, you realize that time has no meaning in this world of swirling skirts and spinning chandeliers. The orchestra plays its final notes, the masks come off for good, and the last carriages creak away into the pale blue morning. You return home exhausted, perfume mingling with fatigue, slippers dangling from your fingers, and the faint echo of laughter ringing in your ears. You've survived another night of gilded excess. Whether you made a new friend, started a new feud, or accidentally accepted a marriage proposal, you have succeeded in the one skill every Gilded Age socialite must master: staying conscious and fabulous until sunrise. And if you manage to enjoy yourself along the way, well, that's just icing on the midnight cake. Travelling means bringing 20 suitcases, 3 poodles and a portrait artist. Your private rail car has a chandelier. Steamship cabins are so luxurious, you might forget you're floating in a giant metal can, at least until someone's lobster escapes at dinner. In the Gilded Age, travel isn't just about getting from point A to point B. It's about the spectacle, the art of being seen crossing great distances with the same sense of entitlement you bring to your own marble staircase. Spontaneity is strictly forbidden. If you wish to visit Newport, you must first assemble a convoy of trunks, hat boxes, animal carriers, and a small battalion of staff. Packing itself is an ordeal that requires its own staff, one to inventory the gloves, another to wrangle the poodles, and a personal secretary to compose the necessary list of excuses to send to those you're snubbing by leaving town. The private railcar is the ultimate symbol of status. Gleaming and custom-appointed, it's less train car and more palace on wheels. There are velvet settees, Tiffany lamps, and a chandelier that swings with every jolt of the track. The dining table is set with bone china and sterling silver. Your chef presides over the kitchen at the rear, creating soufflés while the scenery flashes by at a shocking 30 miles per hour. There's a library stocked with novels, for show, a smoking room for brandy-fueled complaints about the state of the tracks, and a drawing room where you host the sort of teas that, frankly, only make sense when the floor is gently vibrating. Boarding a steamship is equally grand. The harbours swarm with porters, valets, governesses, and a few enterprising reporters eager to chronicle the latest chapter of your social saga. You ascend the gangplank in your best travelling clothes, pausing at the top for a photograph so future generations will know just how dashing you looked in a veil the size of a bridal tent. Your stateroom rivals the square footage of a modest New York apartment, complete with gilt mirrors, Turkish rugs, and naturally a brass bed so bouncy you could launch a small child to France. Days at sea are filled with amusements designed to prevent even a moment of introspection. There are concerts and lectures, promenades on deck, where, rumour has it, one is judged not by wit but by the cut of one's travelling coat, and dinners so elaborate that the ship's lobster supply is in constant peril. If you're lucky, you'll only have to flee 1 or 2 escaped crustaceans during your voyage. The ship's chef, desperate to outdo the competition, might even carve the day's menu in ice, a spectacle for the eyes, if not always for the palate. Of course, travel at this level isn't without its hazards. A strong headwind might delay your arrival, causing chaos with your schedule of carefully choreographed social calls. Trunks might go missing, forcing you to wear yesterday's hat, a scandal worthy of its own society column. Seasickness is considered so gauche that most people simply refuse to acknowledge it, instead turning a delicate shade of chartreuse while insisting that the air is simply bracing. On arrival, your retinue springs into action. The poodles are brushed and beribboned, the portrait artist unpacks his easel, and the footmen erect a barricade of luggage so that you can make your grand entrance unflustered. The local press is notified, acquaintances alerted, and your hostess awaits, ready to judge whether your travel attire has withstood the rigours of luxury transportation. In the end, travel in the Gilded Age is an endurance sport masquerading as a leisure activity. It's about proving you can conquer both distance and discomfort with grace, elegance, and the right set of matching trunks. Whether by rail, steamship, or sheer force of will, you always arrive in style, and if your poodle's portrait makes it onto the society pages, well, that's just the price of being royalty on the move. When the city air grows thick, it's off to your cottage, a 40-room palace on the cliffs of Newport. Days are spent playing lawn tennis, nights are devoted to competitive gossip. The only thing saltier than the ocean air is the family feud simmering in the guest wing. Summer in the Gilded Age isn't a season. It's an opportunity to move your entire life, and staff, to the coastline, where roughing it involves having your breakfast veranda face due east for optimal sunlight and scheduling your afternoons to avoid the glare. These Newport cottages are more Versailles than vacation home. The word modest is used only with irony. Each mansion boasts a ballroom for emergency waltzing, a library filled with books no one will touch until the rainy day that never comes, and a stable for horses that fear actual exercise. Arrival is a spectacle. Carriages line the drive, porters scramble with trunks, and the local florist faints at the sight of your order for 7 dozen hydrangeas, 3 times a week. Guests are greeted at the door by a butler whose accent has grown posher since leaving Manhattan, and shown to suites named for French kings. If you're really unlucky, you get the Louis XIV room, complete with a bed so ornate it could double as a float in a royal parade. daily life in Newport is an artful balance of leisure and showing off. Tennis matches are the morning's entertainment, a sea of linen, flannel and polite sabotage. The only thing more competitive than the games is the competition for the best post-match lemonade. Freshly squeezed and served by the footman voted least likely to spill. For those disinclined to sport, there are croquet tournaments, painting lessons, in which every subject mysteriously resembles Mrs. Astor's poodle, and the daily promenade along the cliffs. One must always be seen, but never caught actually exerting oneself. Afternoons are spent on the porch shaded by striped awnings where the real games begin. Conversation is light but laced with daggers. Which family will throw the grandest ball, who has imported the most Italian marble, and whose cousin is rumoured to have been seen eating at a mere hotel? Guests sip iced tea, fan themselves, and perfect the art of the raised eyebrow. The ocean provides a constant backdrop, its breezes carrying both the scent of salt and the faint sound of servants bickering in the servants' wing. Of course, no Newport escape is complete without an evening of competitive entertaining. Dinner is a 10-course marathon: oysters, turtle soup, roast duck, and desserts that arrive on flambe. And each guest is carefully seated according to social rank, with rival aunts separated by at least one ambitious debutante. After dinner, music drifts from the ballroom, where the waltz is only briefly interrupted for whispered updates on the latest scandal. Fireworks on the lawn cap the night, timed precisely to impress the neighbours and ideally set their hedges trembling with envy. Behind the scenes, old grudges smoulder. The family feud in the guest wing reaches new heights over breakfast when someone accidentally swaps the sugar with salt. Alliances are forged and broken over croquet, and by the third week it's not uncommon for guests to communicate via carefully worded notes delivered by terrified footmen. Yet everyone agrees there's nothing like Newport to bring people together, by which they mean into close enough proximity to inspire a headline or two. As August wanes, the city beckons, and trunks are repacked with souvenirs and secrets. The family returns to Manhattan, refreshed in body if not in spirit, ready for the next round of social jousting. But for a few precious weeks, you've lived in a palace by the sea, survived the perils of leisure, and most importantly, proved once again that no one can overcompensate for summer quite like the Gilded Age elite. Every week brings a fresh scandal, a runaway bride, a suspicious will, or an illicit game of poker. The price of wealth is constant vigilance, and the occasional strategic trip to Europe when the papers get too nosy. In the Gilded Age, the real currency isn't gold or railroad shares, it's reputation. Social standing is as fragile as a meringue in August, and everyone knows the path from dinner party darling to whispered disgrace is only a single headline away. Behind every glittering soiree and impeccably set table lurks a shadow world of secrets, schemes, and the ever-present terror of being the next day's news. It all starts with a whisper, a note slipped into a gloved hand, a coded glance across the ballroom, or a servant with loose lips and excellent timing. Perhaps a debutante has disappeared just days before her wedding, leaving behind only a cryptic letter and a house full of horrified relatives. Maybe the family lawyer, normally as steady as stone, is suddenly sweating through his waistcoat as rumours swirl about a newly discovered cousin from Cincinnati with a claim to the family fortune. In this world, wills are rewritten as often as menus, and even the most innocuous tea party can end with gasps and the fainting couch getting a proper workout. For the truly unfortunate, the scandal goes public. The newspapers, the very ones you fund with generous subscriptions, seem to have a sixth sense for precisely when to strike. "Heiress elopes with coachman," shouts the headline, conveniently omitting the fact that the coachman is actually a minor Hungarian prince with a fondness for horses and absolutely no money. "Dowager caught at midnight card table," another paper crows, featuring your aunt in a surprisingly candid sketch, looking half pleased, half terrified, and entirely guilty of winning the family silver at whist. The wealthy, naturally, have their strategies for survival. Some scandals are smothered before they reach daylight, hushed up with a judicious donation to a favoured charity, or erased from the record by a discreet editor with a fondness for imported cigars. Others are simply endured, their damage mitigated with swift denials and the tried-and-true tactic of sending the offending party on an extended continental tour. Nothing cools gossip quite like a few months on the Riviera and a conveniently vague address in Paris. Occasionally, the scandal is too delicious to be contained. Dinner parties buzz with speculation, fans flutter faster, and invitations to your home dry up overnight. Social ruin, when it comes, is swift and absolute. Families that once dined at the head of the table find themselves quietly shuffled to the shadows, nodding politely at those who still deign to acknowledge them. The children, once assured of the best matches and the finest prospects, are left to fend for themselves, their family's good name now a cautionary tale whispered in the nursery. Yet for all the risk, there's a strange camaraderie in the world of high society scandal. Everyone has something to hide. Everyone has skirted disaster at least once, or knows someone who has. The smart ones collect favours and secrets like fine jewellery, exchanging them as social currency. One well-timed revelation can revive a faded reputation. One slip of the tongue can ruin a rival's season. The most powerful among you are those who know where all the skeletons are hidden, and occasionally dust one off just to remind the others. By the end of the week, as a new scandal begins to brew and the old ones fade to legend, you understand the unspoken rule of the Gilded Age. Wealth can buy you privacy, but it can't buy you immunity. So you keep your secrets close, your allies closer, and your travel trunks packed for an emergency getaway to Europe, just in case the next poker game gets out of hand. And if you ever do find yourself the talk of the town, take heart. In this world, infamy fades almost as quickly as a guest's memory of who spilled red wine on the ballroom carpet. Survival depends not on perfection, but on a good story, a clever escape, and the ability to reappear, eventually, looking unbothered, unscathed, and above all perfectly dressed. It turns out even millionaires can wake up broke. One bad day on Wall Street and suddenly you're auctioning off your silver hairbrushes. Despair is best faced with champagne and denial, and maybe selling a cousin or two to the Vanderbilts. The Gilded Age is famous for excess, but it's equally famous for the spectacular speed with which fortunes could evaporate. The New York Stock Exchange is less a marketplace and more a carnival of risk. One minute your family fortune is secure, and the next you're clinging to the last monogrammed pillow as the servants eye the silverware with entrepreneurial zeal. Rumours of panic travel faster than telegrams. You might start the day with 3 townhouses and a yacht named Serenity, and end it wondering whether you can trade your best poodle for train fare to Newport. It always begins with whispers. A railroad collapses. A copper baron sneezes in the wrong direction. Suddenly, respectable men are sprinting down Wall Street, bowler hats askew, clutching ticker tape like life preservers. You read the headlines with a mixture of dread and disbelief. Panic on the exchange, fortunes lost overnight, society in turmoil, dinner party still on for Thursday. Your banker, who yesterday radiated calm competence, now appears at your front door sweating through his cravat, clutching a ledger and mumbling about liquidity. In the face of disaster, denial is the first line of defence. The staff is instructed to maintain all routines as if nothing is wrong. The butler polishes the silver more vigorously than ever, secretly wondering if he'll soon own it, and the cook serves oysters as usual, though with a slightly resentful slant. Your spouse proposes economising, perhaps by forgoing the imported roses this week, or switching to domestic champagne, gasp. Every letter from the bank is treated like a hand grenade, opened slowly, read with stoic calm, then promptly locked away in the desk until the next round of optimism. When the inevitable arrives, margin calls, foreclosure notices, a for sale sign discreetly placed behind the rose bushes, the real performance begins. Family heirlooms are inventoried with tears and accusations. Aunt Mild, of course, no one faces ruin without a stiff upper lip and a chilled glass. Champagne is poured liberally, toasts made to better days ahead, and every meal is treated as a farewell feast. You remind yourself that everyone in this world is just one bad investment away from catastrophe. Even the Vanderbilts had their lean years, or so you comfort yourself while calculating the silver content of the family flatware. If you're lucky, or just stubborn, you might claw your way back, thanks to a timely inheritance, a business gamble that miraculously pays off, or the benevolence of an old friend. Sometimes a single party, hosted with your last remaining funds, can reboot your social standing, provided the wine flows and no one mentions bankruptcy louder than a whisper. Other times you accept your fate, sell the yacht, and reinvent yourself as a European traveller, sending home sun-drenched postcards and tales of exotic adventure that ideally distract everyone from your absence at next season's balls. Survival in a financial panic is an art form, equal parts optimism, resourcefulness, and selective memory. You may lose a yacht, a townhouse, or your favourite seat at the opera, but as long as you keep your dignity, and at least one poodle, you haven't lost everything. In the Gilded Age, fortunes may crumble, but the real elite know how to weather the storm, with style, a little scheming, and the unwavering hope that tomorrow the market might just smile on them again. Eventually you grow old by Gilded Age standards, that means 52, and start pondering your legacy. Do you endow a university, build a hospital, or just commission the largest mausoleum in the cemetery, complete with marble angels and a bench for people to sit and admire your money long after you're gone? In a world obsessed with status and spectacle, even growing old is a performance. Retirement, in the sense of slippers and a quiet porch, is unthinkable. Instead, you shift your energies from balls and business deals to the pursuit of immortality, if not in body, then at least in name, and a conspicuously extravagant marble vault. Suddenly, philanthropy feels less like a seasonal pastime and more like an existential investment strategy. The first sign of aging isn't the grey at your temples, or the fact that you can no longer see your feet beneath your waistcoat. It's the realization that your rivals are quietly founding libraries, funding orphanages, or having wings of art museums named after them. The arms race for legacy kicks off with a charitable endowment, preferably something that gets your portrait hung in a gilded frame beside a plaque engraved with your achievements, and just a hint of revisionist history. You attend unveiling ceremonies with a dignified smile, applauding as yet another hospital wing is named for your neighbour's wife. At home, the family gathers around the drawing room fire, debating whether to donate the old carriage to the city's fledgling museum, or perhaps bankroll a fountain in the park, a fountain shaped naturally like your family crest. There are arguments about which cause is most meaningful, but deep down, everyone knows the real measure is whose bequest inspires the grandest statue. And then, of course, there's the mausoleum. Why fade quietly into the earth when you can be immortalized in Vermont marble, guarded by cherubs and sphinxes, the envy of every other name in the graveyard? Planning your final resting place becomes an architectural project. You interview sculptors, ponder Greek columns versus Egyptian obelisks, and insist on a crypt with just enough space for a commemorative bench. For visitors who may wish to reflect on your benevolence or at the very least take shelter from the rain. Old age is not without its rituals. You write your memoirs, painstakingly edited by a secretary who discreetly omits the poker scandals and the disastrous Turkey incident of 1879. You consult the family lawyer about trusts, annuities, and making sure that none of your least favourite nephews ever see a penny. You revisit the great rooms of your home, leaving stern notes on the backs of oil paintings. Never sell this unless absolutely necessary, or unless the Astors do it first. There are benefits to seniority. You can finally claim the comfiest chair at the club, dispense advice that is received with reverence, or at least polite boredom, and recount tales of the good old days when fortunes were made, lost, and made again, all before the invention of electric light. Grandchildren orbit your chair, alternately fascinated and bewildered by your tales of a world with stricter dress codes and looser morals. Yet beneath the bluster, there's a quiet reckoning. You reflect on the people you've outlasted, the feuds left unresolved, and the parties that still haunt your dreams. You hope your children will remember your wisdom, your spouse will forget your indiscretions, and the city will pronounce your name correctly when unveiling the grand archway you funded at the train station. As the sun sets on your Gilded Age, your legacy is a patchwork of marble, endowments, and stories, some true, some wildly embellished. You may not know what the next century will bring, but you rest easy knowing your name will echo in ballrooms, libraries, and yes, in the shadow of your very grand, slightly ostentatious mausoleum. After all, in the Gilded Age, the only true retirement plan is being remembered, preferably in stone, with an angel or two looking suitably impressed. There are exclusive clubs, and then there are Gilded Age private clubs, where the only thing thicker than the cigar smoke is the family pedigree required for admission. You're ushered in by a doorman who's been judging people since the Lincoln administration. Inside, gentlemen, and absolutely no ladies, heaven forbid, recline in red leather chairs, trading rumours, brandy, and mutual distrust. The menu, roast beef, politics, and the slow erosion of democracy, all before noon. The private club is the ultimate fortress of exclusivity. To get in, you need more than money. You need the right name, the right sponsor, and preferably a portrait of your great-grandfather hanging somewhere in the library. The membership process is shrouded in more secrecy than most covert government operations. Black balls are cast, sponsors write letters, and, occasionally, a rival family is quietly blacklisted for a generation because someone once ordered a gin and tonic before lunch. Upon arrival, you surrender your hat, your dignity, and your last hope of fresh air. The air in the reading room is dense with cigar smoke, a scent so potent it seeps into your waistcoat and follows you home like a determined creditor. Waiters glide silently, bearing trays of strong coffee and stronger opinions. The decor is intimidating, mahogany panelling, hunting trophies glaring from the walls, and portraits of past presidents who all seem to be silently judging your posture. Seating is strictly hierarchical. The best armchairs, worn to perfection by decades of strategic lounging, are reserved for the oldest and most cantankerous members. Newcomers find themselves perched on the edge of sofas, balancing teacups and social anxieties, hoping for a nod of approval from a senior member. Conversation is a blend of gossip, politics, and gentle mockery, each topic tossed about with the careful calculation of a chess grandmaster. No subject is too grand, too petty, or too irrelevant for spirited debate, provided, of course, it never strays into unseemly territory, meaning anything that might force someone to admit to actual emotion. The dining room is its own kingdom, presided over by a head waiter with the memory of an elephant and the manners of a duchess. Lunch is always heavy. Slabs of roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, creamed spinach, and the kind of pudding that requires an engineering degree to slice. The food is traditional, the portions generous, and the conversation rarely more modern than 1875. The only thing fresher than the rolls is the supply of scandal, delivered in low voices over the second helping of brandy sauce. After lunch, the real business of the club begins. The slow, steady exchange of favours, information, and the occasional backhanded compliment. Gentlemen lean close, murmuring about stocks, city contracts, and who's in danger of being cut dead at next week's ball. If you're lucky, you'll overhear the beginnings of a new alliance, or the end of an old one, formed and broken over a game of billiards played in a haze of pipe smoke and wounded pride. And then, of course, there are the rituals. The annual elections for club president, the debate over whether to admit someone whose money smells suspiciously new, and the sacred tradition of reciting the club's history, a bridge to skip the more embarrassing moments. Rumour has it that somewhere deep in the wine cellar, a secret room is reserved for the inner circle, a place where the most delicate negotiations are hammered out over glasses of port older than most members. Outside, the city pulses with change, but inside the club, time stands still. The world of railroads, telegraphs, and suffragettes can wait. Here, all that matters is the next round of drinks, the comfort of tradition, and the endless, mildly hostile companionship of your fellow clubmen. You emerge hours later, lungs full of heritage, suit full of smoke, and mind brimming with the kind of stories that never make the papers. In the Gilded Age, private clubs aren't just sanctuaries, they're theatres where the real dramas of old money play out, away from prying eyes and the fresh air of progress. When your house has more rooms than you have friends, you need somewhere to hide from Aunt Gertrude or the taxman. Welcome to the world of secret staircases, disguised doors, and entire billiard rooms tucked behind revolving bookcases. It's all fun and games until a guest disappears for 3 days and emerges from the wine cellar claiming to have found enlightenment and a rare vintage. In the Gilded Age, privacy is both a necessity and a status symbol. What's the point of having a 40-room mansion if every single room is visible from the main hallway? No, true wealth is measured not just in chandeliers and imported marble, but in the elaborate labyrinth hidden just behind the respectable velvet drapes. Every self-respecting tycoon hires at least one architect with a suspicious fondness for trapdoors and, ideally, a flair for dramatic escapes. It all starts innocently enough, a hidden closet to store the good china, or a service corridor for maids to avoid being seen carrying chamber pots through polite society. But soon, it spirals into full-fledged architectural intrigue. Sliding panels become de rigueur, and there's always at least one door disguised as a bookshelf, complete with a lever hidden behind the complete works of Pliny the Elder. Pull the wrong volume, and suddenly you're tumbling into a secret study where half-finished letters and a stash of emergency brandy await. Every respectable mansion hosts a treasure trove of secret rooms with questionable purposes. There's the gentleman's retreat behind the library, where business is conducted over cigars and nervous whispers. The music room, so acoustically perfect that you could scream at the top of your lungs and only the family cat would take notice. And the fabled hidden billiard room, legendary among guests who mysteriously vanish mid-evening and return with tales of clandestine poker games and enough gossip to fuel the next 3 social seasons. Of course, there are practical uses. When scandal looms, be it an uninvited reporter, an awkward second cousin, or the aforementioned taxman, a concealed passage is worth its weight in gold. The master of the house simply vanishes through a trick mirror, only to reappear hours later in the conservatory, humming nonchalantly and claiming to have been overseeing the orchids. Children grow up believing every wall has a secret, and more than one family feud is settled through a heated foot race down a hidden staircase. Not all secrets are so innocent. Rumour has it certain families maintain emergency exits for discreet departures to waiting carriages, used when polite conversation takes a turn or when an overzealous suitor needs to be gently redirected. Some mansions boast hidden cellars, perfect for storing the kind of contraband, or relatives, best kept out of sight during prohibition or family gatherings. There are even stories, unconfirmed naturally of entire dining rooms designed to be walled off at a moment's notice, so that an unwanted guest can be quietly forgotten until the next holiday. For guests, exploring these mysteries is half the fun. After a glass or two of champagne, someone inevitably gets lost trying to find the powder room and stumbles into a secret passage. The search for the legendary lost door becomes a party game. Occasionally a visitor is truly misplaced for a day or two, only to be found happily sampling rare wines or sleeping off the world's most luxurious game of hide and seek. The staff, of course, knows all the shortcuts and delights in dropping cryptic hints, just enough to keep the household on its toes. In the end, secret passages and hidden rooms are more than just architectural curiosities. They're a playful, extravagant answer to the age-old problem of too much house and not enough privacy. They offer escape, adventure, and, for the truly daring, a place to hide when the conversation turns to estate taxes. In the Gilded Age, privacy isn't a necessity for the poor. It's a delightful game for the rich. Christmas in a Gilded Age mansion is less silent night and more. Let's see if the tree will hold 200 glass ornaments and a live peacock. Every holiday is an arms race of imported baubles, towering cakes, and so many candles. It's amazing anything survived to New Year's. Meanwhile, servants are roped into amateur theatrics, and at least one uncle always gets stuck inside a papier-mâché turkey. To begin with, holiday preparation starts sometime in early November, right after the last guest has been politely evicted from your summer cottage. The head butler draws up a checklist long enough to make a general weep, and the household is mobilized into a flurry of festive activity. The florist is tasked with transforming the staircase into a botanical wonderland, and the housekeeper can be heard muttering darkly about pine needles in the carpets until Valentine's Day. Meanwhile, a team of footmen is dispatched to source the largest tree this side of Quebec, with strict orders not to return unless it requires a block and tackle to manoeuvre through the front door. Decorating the tree is a full-contact sport. The family gathers in the drawing room, each person competing for the most outrageous ornament. Aunt Edith contributes a glass pickle she claims is a German tradition. Your mother insists on stringing pearls, and the children, supervised by the nursery maid, attempt to sneak cookies onto the lower branches. At some point, someone suggests live animals for authenticity, which is how the peacock comes to be perched, slightly bewildered, above the manger scene. The kitchen becomes a war zone. The cook leads an army of apron-clad assistants in constructing gingerbread houses large enough to rent out as guest quarters. Cakes rise and collapse with dramatic flair, and the annual pudding steaming is regarded as both a family tradition and a public safety hazard. Platters of roasted goose, glazed hams, and pyramids of candied fruits appear in such abundance that even the family dog starts to look nervous. Gifts, naturally, must outshine last year's. Monogrammed silver hairbrushes, diamond brooches, and imported French perfume are only the beginning. There are presents for every member of the staff, sometimes handed out in a grand lineup, with the butler announcing each gift like a royal decree. The children receive so many toys that the nursery is briefly declared a disaster area, and at least one toy train is inevitably lost in the maze of parlour furniture until next Easter. Entertainment is mandatory. The drawing room is transformed into a theatre, with the staff pressed into service as actors, musicians, and sometimes unwilling reindeer. There are recitations of Dickens, impromptu concerts on the pianoforte, and a spirited, if slightly off-key, sing-along that only ends when the youngest cousin nods off in a pile of velvet cushions. And of course, there's the annual holiday charade, a performance so chaotic it becomes legend, especially the year Uncle Harold got stuck in the papier-mâché turkey and had to be extracted by the footman and half the kitchen staff. If all goes well, the evening concludes with a torchlit procession around the gardens, candles flickering, laughter echoing, and the faint sound of the peacock deciding it's had quite enough of seasonal festivities. Midnight is marked by the ringing of silver bells, the clinking of champagne glasses, and heartfelt, if slightly slurred, toasts to family, fortune, and surviving another year with only minor fire damage. The next morning, the aftermath is surveyed. Pine needles on the stairs, bits of tinsel in the soup, and an exhausted staff collapsing in the scullery with leftover fruitcake. But for a brief, glittering moment, the mansion has been transformed, less a home, more a stage for the grandest holiday spectacle this side of the Atlantic. In the Gilded Age, the holidays aren't just about celebration, they're about proving once again that when it comes to excess, no one decks the halls, or the help, with more determination, style, or pure glittering audacity. Feeling faint after dinner? Suffering from nerves or the vapours? Good news. Your family doctor is just down the hall, ready to prescribe cocaine toothache drops, leeches, or a brisk trip to the seaside. Gilded Age medicine is where cutting-edge science meets wild guesswork. Your odds of survival improve if you ignore half the advice and just stick to brandy. For the Gilded Age elite, medicine is less a precise science and more a theatrical experiment performed with equal parts optimism and bravado. No self-respecting household is complete without at least one resident physician, ideally a gentleman with impressive whiskers, a battered medical bag, and a willingness to declare anything from a mild cough to existential malaise as a touch of the vapours. He arrives at breakfast, consulting a small calendar of fashionable ailments. Neuralgia for Aunt Agatha, gout for Uncle Horace, and a seasonal case of melancholy for anyone who's read the newspapers. The range of available treatments is dazzling. For a simple headache, you might be prescribed a syrup containing cocaine, opium, or both. A miracle cure that relieves all pain while sparking an alarming enthusiasm for reciting poetry and reorganizing the parlour. Toothache. Your doctor recommends a dab of cocaine on the gums, followed by a hearty claret rinse. Insomnia. Laudanum before bed, and if you're still awake, a stern lecture about the dangers of overexcitement. If you feel peaky, the solution is clear. Leeches. These slippery little miracle workers are dispatched with military precision to various limbs, while your physician explains at length how they rebalance the humours and draw out the badness. Bleeding in general remains a popular solution, though even the most devoted practitioners admit it's best not to look too closely at the results. Perhaps you're suffering from nerves, a diagnosis applied to any affliction not covered by gout, consumption, or stubbornness. The cure? A brisk trip to the seaside, of course. Fresh air, salt water, and complete boredom are the order of the day. You're encouraged to lie on the beach, fully dressed, drink mineral water of dubious origin, and write long, overwrought letters to friends back home. For more persistent symptoms, the doctor may suggest a visit to the Turkish baths, an electric shock treatment, or, if all else fails, a daily regimen of claret and avoidance of relatives. Occasionally, more modern therapies make an appearance. Electric belts, vibratory chairs, and galvanic baths are all the rage, guaranteed to cure everything from asthma to heartbreak, provided you don't mind being slightly electrocuted in the process. The less adventurous simply opt for a brisk walk in the fresh air or an ice bath, supervised by a butler who has seen enough to question the very notion of progress. The greatest peril, however, is not disease, but the sheer volume of conflicting advice. One doctor prescribes cod liver oil for vigour, another insists on daily whiskey, a third swears by celery pills and enthusiastic calisthenics. The family matriarch, meanwhile, believes all illness can be traced to wet feet and recommends woolen stockings, regardless of season or sense. At least the pharmacist is reliable, dispensing a rainbow of patent medicines, each more dubious than the last and all promising miraculous results if taken with a stiff upper lip, and preferably on a full stomach. Surviving illness is a mix of luck, genetics, and knowing when to smile, nod, and quietly pour your tinctures down the drain. The truly wise keep a bottle of brandy handy, not only as a universal remedy, but as an escape hatch from overzealous physicians and relatives eager to discuss their own ailments. In the Gilded Age, medicine is a blend of high hopes and hilarious hazards. You might live to a ripe old age or succumb to a fit of the vapours during a dull dinner party. Either way, you do it in style, confident that even if the cure doesn't work, at least you'll have a wonderful story for the next afternoon's tea. And so, you've survived a day in the Gilded Age. Barely. You made it through breakfast fit for emperors, dinner parties that doubled as gladiator matches, and the daily struggle to keep your top hat from blowing away in a strong breeze. Maybe your corset's a little too tight, maybe your fortune's evaporated in the latest stock panic, and maybe, just maybe, you never figured out which fork was for the salad. But hey, at least you didn't get lost in your own secret passage or accidentally buy a diamond collar for your neighbour's dog. Progress. It's easy to laugh at the excess and absurdity, to marvel at the poodles in tiaras and the gold-plated bathtubs. But beneath all the peacocking, there's a lesson written in velvet and spilled champagne. Even the filthy rich had their headaches, their private disasters, their midnight anxieties about whether their silver was polished enough to impress someone who'd already forgotten their name. All that glitters really isn't gold. It's often just stress with better lighting. So tonight, as you settle into your bed, maybe not carved from Italian marble, maybe not attended by 6 sleepy servants, but yours all the same, let yourself feel a little grateful. Grateful for quiet rooms, simple pleasures, hot showers, and pyjamas that don't require a team of experts. Whisper a thank you to those Gilded Age survivors who walked so we could run to the thermostat in the middle of the night and pour ourselves a glass of water without needing a butler's permission. Because history, even when gilded, is just people muddling through, clumsy, hopeful, stubborn, and occasionally absurd. If they could find a way to laugh through their own ridiculousness, surely so can we. Good night. May your dreams be lighter than your dinner, your burdens softer than your pillows, and your tomorrow just a little more comfortable than the past.